Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools media briefing. We have our panelists joining us today, Superintendent Ernest Winston, Mr. Brian Kingsley, Dr. Matt Hayes, Ms. Monica Damian, and Ms. Christine Pajot. We'll get started. Superintendent will kick us off, same format as the last few weeks, in which we will have some brief opening remarks. Then we will open things up for questions, and we will call on one representative of one media outlet at a time to ask one question. And if we can get through a round of questions from each individual at each outlet that has questions, then we'll move through as time allows for additional questions, additional rounds of questions until about 2:35 this afternoon. So with that, I'm going to throw it to Superintendent Winston for some opening remarks. Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this brief media availability with our CMS district leaders. I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Today's briefing represents the third week of our ongoing effort to share information regularly with you as we prepare to return our pre-K, elementary, K-8, and our students with disabilities identified for in-person services through an IEP process on February the 15th, followed by middle school and high school students on February the 22nd. We have been working hard to ensure the safety and health of our teachers and students as we return to in-person learning in our facilities at the direction from our Board of Education. We continue to monitor staffing, resources, and facilities, and we're confident that we are ready and will be prepared next week on February the 9th to provide an update to our board members that we are ready to return on the dates and in the rotations we previously designated. So today, members of our district leadership team are here to provide updates and information about some of the topics generating conversation in our community, and to be able to share news about some exciting partnerships that are impacting our community. And so I would like to start with some good news about the success, about access, I should say, to the COVID-19 vaccine. We as a district, we continue to advocate with our state and local public health officials to get priority access for our student-facing staff as early as possible. As a result of the partnership that we have with Novant Health and Mecklenburg County Public Health, we were able to provide access and secure 165 appointments for CMS staff age 65 and older for vaccinations this week. Those staff members who secured appointments will be receiving their first vaccination tomorrow at McClintock Middle School. And we continue our discussions with Novant and other partners on quickly getting access to the vaccine for our remaining employees who are 65 and older and other student-facing staff as more vaccine supply become available. This is hopefully just one of many opportunities that we will be able to provide our employees as we continue to advocate for more access. And so this week, I know that a topic that has been generating many questions is our response to Governor Cooper's press conference this week, where he stressed the importance of returning our children safely to the classroom. And many of you all have asked if this impacts our return to in-person learning plans or changes our current return date. And so let me just say that the decision that our board made in January, on January the 14th, remains our clear directive, and we are making every preparation and will communicate to our staff, our students, our families, and our community partners that we will return on those dates. So really the governor's message really reinforces our resolve, and we continue to move toward the anticipated date of return while we maintain rigorous and effective safety protocols in all of our schools as outlined by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. So we are ready to welcome our students and staff to in-person learning on February the 15th and 22nd. Some of our high school student athletes, I'm excited, will begin competing today in regionals, and they're excited for the opportunity that this offers these talented young student athletes who have trained so very hard. However, as a reminder, we remain committed to enforcing our safety protocols that must be followed during practices and competitions, and we'll communicate frequently to our student athletes, our coaches, our arts participants, and other out-of-school programs the importance of this message. Let me touch for a moment on another topic that we continue to focus on, and that's the importance of improving grades and chronic absenteeism. And I think those two issues are linked. We're putting strategies in place to address these issues. We're working close with our learning gap that has developed as a result of the pandemic. And we are very encouraged to see the many innovative and creative ways that our principals, our teachers, and other staff at individual schools are reaching out to families in some unique ways that are suited to their particular community to re-engage students who may be struggling. As we have learned, remote learning looks different across our many student populations, and family-based hardships as a result of the pandemic can greatly impact a student's ability to be engaged and school ready on a daily basis. So we celebrate the learning community leaders, our principals, and our committed instructional staff who are overcoming the various challenges each day to reach families where they are and to help reduce absences. Many of our school staff are conducting home visits and creating targeted family plans for student engagement. That includes specific programs and events to increase attendance and mitigate falling grades. One example is the outreach by Renaissance West STEAM Academy staff with their Parade of Progress this week, driving through the neighborhood to encourage our kids to get engaged in learning and to create awareness around the importance of showing up. So we continue to monitor this, and we will be gearing up for a strong close of the school year, paired with a robust summer program opportunities for academic acceleration. We're going to be sharing more about these different opportunities in the months ahead, but I do want to highlight another very positive development that our Chief Academic Officer, Brian Kingsley, will address a little bit later. And that's the recent news about the North Carolina Education Corps, which is a new partnership between the North Carolina State Board of Education, the Office of the Governor, and the North Carolina Commission on Volunteerism and Community Service. The Education Corps members, they're going to provide emergency relief, employing community members to provide wraparound services to our K-12 students, especially important as we know that many students are struggling to keep up with learning. And I know that Mr. Kingsley will have a chance to share those details about the positive impact this will have on our community. I would like to make a plea to our students, our families, and our staff throughout our area. We are very close to returning our students and staff for in-person learning. Our public health metrics are going in the right direction. We want to get back to a sense of something close to normalcy with students experiencing in-person instruction. But this weekend, important weekend, and I think you all know why, we cannot let our guard down and act as though the big football game on Sunday evening is happening in a normal year. It's not. Both our national and our local public health experts have issued warnings that we should not attend parties or watch the game outside of our homes with people who do not live in our houses. So please use caution. Please follow the advice of public health experts. We cannot afford to have a few hours of irresponsible social gathering cause a spike that threatens to set our progress back. And in doing so, impacting our to open and open for our students to learn in person. And so I want to thank you all for joining us again today. And at this time, I believe we will open up our meeting for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Before we open it up for the first question, we have a few hands raised there, and we'll certainly get to all of those as quickly as we can. Any of our panelists have any brief remarks that you want to make before we open for questions?
Mr. Smith, is it okay if I build off of Superintendent Winston's comments about the North Carolina Education Corps briefly?
Please do.
Thank you. Our district would like to thank State Board of Education member Eric Davis in partnership with our superintendent, Mr. Winston, for bringing partnership with North Carolina Education Corps to Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. This provides an opportunity for people in our community who have time, who may have been negatively impacted in the workforce, to get back to work and engage our community to help our students prosper. We are well positioned to be able to hire 105 North Carolina Education Corps members between now and April 1st for two purposes. One, first and foremost, we are going to have an incredibly targeted approach, a laser-like focus on ensuring any of our students in grades kindergarten through grade 3 who are struggling to achieve the foundational skills that are necessary to be college and career ready in terms of being targeted to be reading on grade level by 3rd grade. We want to make sure that we're focusing on providing them high-end tutoring services through the 4th quarter of this year and throughout the course of the summer. We will be hiring 70 tutors that will be working both remotely as well as in person across various entities in our community to be able to support those children. And I want to give a special thank you to Monroe Richardson and Reed Charlotte for helping doing this in partnership with us to ensure that we have a laser-like focus on how those targeting services meet the individual needs of our students. In addition to hiring tutors to be a part of the Education Corps, we also are going to be hiring 35 contact tracers to be working with our respective learning communities in our central office to support our schools and our school principals to be able to support the monitoring efforts of COVID-19 to ensure that we're continuing to provide the safest environment possible for all of our students in our community. Both of those vacancies in terms of contact tracers and literacy tutors are open now at the nceducationcorps.org website. If you can go there and have an opportunity to choose to apply, we will be working with you and contact you right away, but we're really eager and interested in getting these services off the ground. And again, I want to thank our superintendent for committing to using a significant portion of the governor's emergency relief dollars to invest in these really important areas of need. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And we will provide more information about the website that you mentioned and those that important information with members of the media and the general public. At this time, we'll get straight to questions. First question from Christina Bowling. Christina?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Okay. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for making yourselves available. It's really great for us as reporters to have this access to you. Wanted to ask Superintendent Winston, you referenced the new state guidelines this week. You know, there were new state guidelines this week that said that students in kindergarten through 5th grade should return to in-person instruction, 5 days a week to the fullest extent possible while following the public health protocols. And from your remarks just a minute ago, it sounded like you are not planning to recommend any changes to the CMS's return to classroom plan. But I'm wondering what would be a reason for not accelerating that K-5 return plan, kind of bringing them back more days per week, as it seems like the state is recommending for counties.
Yes, thank you, Christine, for your question. Appreciate that very much. We believe we have the right plan in place that the board approved back on in January 14th. That's the plan that we're moving forward with. But that does not mean that we're not constantly evaluating our progress and could come back at a future meeting and recommend a slightly different plan that increases either the frequency in which kids come back or bringing more students into our classrooms. That will be based on our data and our evaluation as we move forward. We believe it's prudent to start in the place where we plan on February the 15th and then bring back our middle and high school students on February the 22nd. And we'll continue to monitor our progress toward the goal of bringing more students back in person.
Next question from Ann Helms, and then Brett Jensen, you're up next.
Okay, am I on?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon. And Christina asked the question I was most interested in, but talk a little more. In all these briefings, I have heard the health people say in-person classes, absolutely, we need to do that. It's safe. Basketball, indoor sports, anything that involves singing or shouting, we really don't recommend that. So could you talk a little more about continuing with basketball practices and games? And I think you opened things to music and theater. Will students be in a room singing together?
Dr. Hayes, you want to take that one?
I'll be more than happy to. Thank you. Great question. And so I will tell you that one of the things for our sports and that we considered as we looked at bringing sports and clubs and activities for our high school students is we hear a lot about the social interaction that's needed at that for our teenagers. That was key to this whole decision in which to do that. We value that just about as much as we do them having the opportunity to earn grades in the classroom. So that was a guiding force in that, is to make sure that we looked at the students' well-being and that socialization that's key at the high school years, especially with our teenagers. I will tell you that, yes, there are strict guidelines that are following with our arts and our after-school programs, just like there are with our athletic teams. They will be required to wear a mask at all times. They will be required to maintain social distancing. So they will be working in small groups, just as the athletes are, with very tight supervision. We also have made it very clear to just not only our principals, our ADs, and all of our coaches throughout the ranks, that at any point in time that we see that any of these things are not being followed to the specific guidelines that have been set by the district, they run the risk of being stopped. So safety is our number one concern. But once again, we also understand that our students, part of being in education, part of being public education, is not only that you provide students an opportunity to learn and receive grades, but also that you give them an opportunity for that socialization as well. And that's what we're doing with that.
Brett Jensen.
Ernest, like Christina said earlier, I want to say thanks for doing this. Is a former reporter. I'm sure you understand how much we appreciate this. But I also want to jump back on what Christina and Ann was going to ask you about not going back to school 5 days a week, at least early on. You talked about following the public health experts, the study with the American Academy of Pediatrics with UNC and Duke, the CDC up in Wisconsin, Iceland, Sweden, Germany, Norway. They all have had these studies that show that teachers are safe and that it's very rare for kids to give it to teachers. Not going back, is it just basically because you may not have the full staffing capabilities, like was the issue in October, with bus drivers or cafeteria workers, or is it still just a fear of public safety?
Brett, thank you for that question. I will say that we believe we have the right plan in place. It's the plan that our Board of Education approved, and we intend on implementing that plan beginning on February the 15th. I think what is key in this discussion is the fact that each community is different. And you have to consider the local circumstances in each community. For Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, we believe the plan we have in place to bring a portion of our students back on February 15th and the rest beginning on February the 22nd. We believe that's the best plan. We're prepared to implement that plan, and we remain cautiously optimistic from a staffing standpoint. Our metrics are moving in the right direction, and I know that Ms. Pajot can talk more about staffing levels, but we're cautiously optimistic around our successful reopening on February the 15th for in-person learning.
Christine, do you want to add there? I have something to jump in with as well after that.
Sure. I mean, I think really the phrase that we have been using is cautiously optimistic, and that is because the situation around leaves and vacancies, particularly leaves, is a very fluid situation. So it requires that constant monitoring to see where we are in terms of staffing levels for those primary categories that we share weekly on that dashboard. So you'll recall that this week, some of those metrics still remain in yellow. So that in and of itself is cautionary. But as we continue to monitor that, we can then inform the superintendent, who can continue to inform the board in terms of where we stand. And I think it is an important thing for us to continue to be cognizant of, because it is a community, district by district charge to make sure that we're ready and safe across the board.
And before we move on to the next question, I would just say that just to reference the CDC study and others, there are some parts of that study that also recommend things that if schools are going to be prioritized, some other things need to be have less priority. And that's clearly written in that study. And in places like Norway and Germany and Sweden, they took various actions along those lines that have enabled schools to reopen safely because they had greater restrictions for a longer period of time in many cases. So let's make that clear as well. Now we will have a question from Maureen O'Boyle, and then Lexi Wilson, you'll be up next.
I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Superintendent, I have a quick question. In a meeting online, Gibby Harris from the Mecklenburg County Health Department said that she was very encouraged with the idea of kids going back to school, but she did say that she had concern about staffing. I know you all feel confident that you have the staffing. I would imagine it's going to take a lot of people to keep spaces clean and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about the efforts that you will have to put into place to make sure the physical buildings are clean and what that staffing is going to be like?
I'm happy to take that question, Superintendent Winston, if you'd like.
By all means, I couldn't find my mute button, but go ahead.
All right, yes, and I'm going to push back a little bit, Maureen. So I don't know that we are confidently, cautiously optimistic. So I think there's a difference in saying confident that we have the staffing as opposed to being optimistic and that the trends appear to be that we're going to be okay. That's not to say that we are not going to have challenges. So if you were looking at the metrics dashboard this week and what's likely to be the preview for next week, our custodial staffing, for example, remains in yellow. So what does that mean for us? That means our teams are working very diligently to be able to make sure that we have adequate alternative sources of staffing. So for example, deploying temporary help to sites that might see more of a gap in terms of vacancies or leaves. So we're not only just monitoring the situation in terms of those vacancies and leaves within CMS, but we're also taking steps, especially in the custodial area, to make sure that we can use that contingent workforce to be able to fill any holes that we have. And again, our operation team leads work very hard in being able to deploy staff based on that need. So if there are situations where we have to redeploy staff to different sites to be able to address those needs, then we will. In terms of PPE, we are doing excellent. We have already issued, actually early on, you'll recall during the pandemic, every single staff member was able to receive 7 face coverings. we still have additional face coverings for any employees who need them. We also have adequate supply, and we have been able to confirm face shields for any employee who needs them or desires them. So, for example, for our staff who work with our EC population of students and also our bus drivers have been provisioned with face shields in addition to those face coverings. And again, for any staff who is interested in that, we have those available on hand, ready to send out to schools and to employees who would like them.
Thank you, Christine. Lexi Wilson and then Miranda Whittington.
All right. Hello. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. So 165 appointments for those 65 years and older employees this week. But what do you say to those employees who are below that age group who don't want to get back into the classroom unless they are vaccinated? And why is it so important to get CMS employees that vaccine?
I'll go ahead and get us started with this particular question. Thank you, Lexi. We continue to advocate for all of our employees to be prioritized. And I want to be very careful in regard, and I mentioned this earlier, that CMS is not signing employees up for the vaccine, but we're working with some very important community partners to provide our employees access to the vaccine. And so that's extremely important to us. And as we move in further into the groups, i.e. Group 3, we will continue to work with our partners to provide all employees access to the vaccine, which is one important mitigation effort. And so we think that's extremely important. I want our employees to know that your team is advocating on your behalf to ensure that you have access to the vaccine when those become available.
Miranda Whittington.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, and then Annie Ma.
I know you mentioned Super Bowl weekend and trying to make sure, people try not to go to these events. If there's a chance that we do get a spike after this past weekend, will that change, the plans that you guys already have in place to get students and staff back into schools?
Miranda, thank you for that question. That's a very good question. We are continuing to monitor our metrics, as Ms. Pajot mentioned earlier. It's difficult to look into the crystal ball and predict what will happen as a result of this weekend. We truly do hope that members of our community heed the advice to be safe this weekend, to follow the proper protocols so that not only our community can open back up in some sense of normalcy, but also that our students can return to in-person learning. So we hope our community heeds that advice.
Annie.
Hi, Superintendent. I just had a quick question going back to something Ann Helms had asked and Christina Bowling as well. I just wondered, has the district considered making changes to the 6 through 12 rotations? And if, regardless of if you have or haven't, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what any limitations for middle and high school might be that aren't present at the elementary school level in terms of bringing kids back 2 days a week instead of once every 3 weeks. I just would love to be able to understand your thinking behind that.
Sure, Annie. Thank you for that question. I think, so we always have, we're always considering